Hello Internet, I'm Alex from Barefaced and I'm going to try and answer the mystical question, why does Celestion make so many different 12-inch guitar drivers? Now, you might have seen this video before. This is a new version of it based on my learnings over a few years. I am the owner, boss, chief engineer at Barefaced, and we make these unique guitar cabs with this AVD in the back, which is a patented invention that improves the tone and performance in the real world, recording, live, whatever, of guitar speakers. So, based on that, we've sold quite a lot of guitar cabs over however many years since we've been making them. 4 years of these. And I've heard a lot of speakers and I've had a lot of feedback, and yeah, I think we can do this video better than we did last time. So this time, I'm just going to talk about tone, and in another video I'll talk about sensitivity and power handling, maybe in 2 videos. Who knows? But let's try and get to the bottom of what's happening tonally with all these different speakers. So up here we have the Alnicos. Apparently it's Alnico, not Alnico, because it's aluminium, nickel, cobalt. I knew that, but I hadn't thought of how the composite word should be pronounced. And then we've got the Greenback posse down here, and let's work our way through. It's quite hard to explain how they all interrelate, but I will do my best. So the Blue's the original. That was a radiogram type speaker from the 50s, which ended up in guitar cabs, and it's gone on from there. It's clean, clear, it's got quite a magical sound. The Cream is a higher power version of the Blue, but it's similar in tone, but chunkier, fatter, but it's similarly bright. So I've sort of done a scale here from bright to dark, dark to bright. The Gold is like a more mellow blue, and the Ruby sort of warmer, rounder, more mellow still. So, and then this scale across here, we're going from kind of thinner to chunkier. We're going to bigger sounds this way. 15 watts, 90 watts, 50 watts, 35 watts, I think. They're all 100 dB sensitivity. They're loud speakers. And they have this magical thing that happens with Alnico magnets, which I'll get to in a second. Down here, we have the Greenback posse. The G12 EVH is most similar to the original medium magnet Greenbacks. So that's a warm 60s sounding speaker. If you want more power handling and more sensitivity, you can go to the G12M Greenback, but the downside of that is it doesn't have quite as much clarity as the G12 EVH, though conversely, you might prefer the tone of it because it isn't quite as clear. You could go to an even brighter one, the G12H Anniversary, which is brighter than the G12 EVH. It's got a stronger magnet on it, it's got more push, it's maybe a bit tighter in the lows, more top, more mids. Or we can go to a more high power handling version of the Greenback. This is the G12M65 Creamback. This has still got the medium sized magnet, so it handles more power, doesn't have any more sensitivity. It's actually slightly lower in sensitivity than the Greenbacks, in between the Greenback and the EVH in sensitivity, but handles 65 watts rather than 25 or 20 in the case of those. This handles 30 watts. If you want a higher power handling version of the G12H Anniversary, we've got the G12H75 Creamback, which handles 75 watts, also has a big magnet on it, and that's got a bigger sound than the G12H Anniversary. It's not as bright, so essentially I've done brightness heading in that direction. So brightness from low to high, same here on this side. So we're all heading to the G12H Anniversary being the most forward of these speakers. And we've got the G12H150 Redbacks, that's the 150 watt version of the Creamback. And that consequently sounds a bit darker, a bit heavier than the Creamback, because magnet's the same size, but you've got heavier moving mass that you've got to push. And we also have the Neo Greenback, so that's got a neodymium magnet rather than a ferrite magnet, and that is somewhere in between the G12M65 and the G12H75 tonally. I would say slightly more towards the G12H, but it has a different character as well, subtly. Probably not the sort of thing you might be able to tell. I was going to say it might only be an A/B test thing, but who knows. But basically, if you like the Greenback sound and you want a much lighter speaker, then the Neo Greenback is the way to go. Obviously with the cabs we make, the barefaced ones, as I shall demonstrate here, one finger lift, 1x12. So you don't need that. Oh, that's got an Alnico in cream in it, which is not a lightweight speaker. So lightweight cab, but a heavyweight speaker in there. You don't need to go Neo to have a light cab if you buy a cab from us. But if you want to go crazy light, then Neo's an option. Over here, we have Celestion's one American sounding speaker, the A-type. So that has a more mellow top end to compensate for the natural tone curve of a typical American sounding amp, because basically how the Fender tone stack differs from the Marshall tone stack. That's another video as well. And then a new arrival, the G12M50 Hempback, which kind of sits in between the Greenback and the A-type. And then we can go up here, we have the Vintage 30. So the Vintage 30 is very transparent for a ferrite ceramic magnet speaker. It's got no gaps in the response. Consequently, some people don't like it because it shows up issues with their tone, or it's harsh or whatever, depending on what you're putting into it. But it's really remarkably honest for a guitar speaker, because guitar speakers are inherently quite coloured things. We like it. It's loud, it handles a lot of power, it's very tonally versatile. It's just not going to, doesn't take any prisoners when it comes to bad playing or bad tone going into it. If you would like something that has a lot of clarity, like the Vintage 30, but you would like more power handling or lighter weight, then we've got these two Neo variants, the Neo 250 Copperback and the BN12 300S. This is actually a bass speaker, but it works great for guitar. Essentially, the Neo 250 Copperback is like a brighter, leaner version of the Vintage 30, and the BN12 300S is like a darker, chunkier version of the Vintage 30, but rather than being a 60-watt speaker like that, it's a 250-watt speaker or a 300-watt speaker, so they do handle a huge amount of power. Now, in between the Vintage 30 and the Greenback family, we have the V-type. This is a much underappreciated speaker because it does have that Vintage 30 clarity, but just softened and warmed up a bit more like the G12M Greenback. I'd say that's the sort of, it's the middle ground between those two. Maybe also the middle ground between the G12H75 Greenback. These two are more similar than these two because of this big magnet compensates for the higher moving mass, the chunkier cone that's on this one. And then down here we have the more, I would say the metal speakers, but this G1265 Heritage is for metal people who don't like metalcore metal. So basically AC/DC and things like that. This is a very AC/DC sound. It's a great, aggressive, hard rock speaker. G12T75 is like an early 80s thrash speaker. This is your Ride the Lightning speaker, so it's scooping out your tone more. This is quite aggro, darker in the top. This scoops out more. This goes even heavier into that sort of late 80s, early 90s thrash thing. And then this classic lead 80 is much darker than any of these. It's a bit like the G1265 Heritage in the darkness on the top, but more so. And the G1265 Heritage has that bite that you get from that AC/DC sound. Did I mention the G12 H150 Redback? That's kind of your, that's your speaker for when you're heading from the Greenback land into this land. It's warmer and richer than these, which are very tight and lean and kind of hard in comparison. This has a richness to it. And talking about richness, this is one of these other things. The Neo magnet it basically generates less distortion. This is another sort of video that I've got to do, but you're dealing with things like eddy currents, Barkhausen noise, flux modulation. It starts to get into deep physics. I mean, I've been learning more about how magnets work recently, and it comes down to quantum physics and electron spin and the Pauli exclusion principle, which is quite mind-bending even for a sort of engineering type like me. I guess I'm an engineer, not a physicist. But the essence of these neomagnets is they are more honest. They create less distortion in the sound. And what we hear with the guitar speakers is that a Neo V-type does not sound as rich or as warm with clean tones as a V-type, and it also sounds harsher, more revealing with distorted tones. So if you can get your tone sorted with a V-type and then switch to a Neo V-type, you probably won't like the sounds as much. However, if you get your tone sorted with a Neo V-type and then go to a V-type, you'll be like, that's a bit kind of muddier and it's a bit, I'm missing some of the detail and the grit. So it's not that Neo is a better magnet material than ferrite, than these ceramic magnets, but it doesn't introduce such a favourable coloration for guitar, so you have to do a bit more tweakery to get to it. I found as a bassist that I prefer what a Neo magnet can do because it is more revealing and less coloured. So this is literally down to how the magnetic field behaves under the influence of the magnetic field generated by the voice coil. So it's pretty deep physics. But yeah, so we found the same with the Neo Greenback. Again, it loses some of the clean sound richness and the warmth that happens on dirty sounds compared to these two Greenbacks, but it's not life-changing, and it is much lighter, and if you get your tone happening with a Neo Greenback, you can have a really great tone. But it does slightly clean things up. It's slightly more revealing than those, which is probably why when they made the Century Vintage, was that what it was called? It was a kind of a Neo version of the Vintage 30. It got discontinued, presumably because people found it even more revealing than a Vintage 30. So also these Neo things, although this is darker and chunkier, it does have that Neo honesty that the Vintage 30 doesn't have. Likewise, the Neo 250 Copperback, that is very revealing. However, if you go over here to Alnico, this magnet material manages to be revealing like a Neo magnet, but sound prettier than a ceramic magnet. And the reason for that is it deals with eddy currents in the honest and transparent and accurate way that Neo magnets do, but it also suffers a thing with, I think it's probably best called dynamic demagnetization. So essentially, when the electromagnet in the voice coil generates a field that pushes against the permanent magnet of the Alnico gives more. So it essentially rounds off edges, softens up your tone, compresses slightly, and the harder you push it, the more it does that. So just as your amp's breaking up more and things should be getting dirty and the voice coil behaviour and the cone are overdriving more, the magnet's actually compensating for that. So I'm a huge fan of these. They sound fantastic. The amazing thing about a cream is it's not really as bright. It doesn't have as much bite as a Vintage 30, but it manages to sound as clear, and it all seems to come through mid-range detail. But it's not that it has more mid-range. It's remarkable. Downside of Alnico, they're expensive, but we don't make cheap cabs. Everything that's going into them is to make the best speaker cabinets in the world. So if you like the sound of them, they're not for everyone, but if you like the sound of them, they are, yeah, they're incredible. They really are. Other things that I have pondered about this, I mean, there is a richness in the Greenback and Greenbacks, which is really nice, and that you don't get so much from these, and that's where these come in between. Likewise, the A-type has a sort of darkness and a cleanness, but this brings in that sort of richness in between. So you've got these kind of in-between LANs, V-types and the hemp back. Likewise, these are great for getting heavy, but if you want these richer, more colourful, clean sounds, then the Redback manages to do this thing rather well, but also this thing rather well. It also handles a huge amount of power, 150 watts, so if you want, you can put that in a 1x12 and then put a big head on top of it, and we do 1x12s to suit that. You can put a big head on them. And you're getting more output from the AVD, which helps a lot and helps get your tone around the room. It means you don't need to stack this high. You can actually have your speaker down here out of sight, but the sound is coming up to you. I think I've covered everything. It's quite a lot, isn't it? So I'll do another video about power and sensitivity and things like that. And we need to make demo videos. I also want to do some videos about mixing drivers, because that's an interesting thing to do in 212s or pairs of 112s or even more speakers if you want. But yeah, tell me if that helps you. Tell me how that compares if you've seen the other video. This video is more accurate. I've taken what I learnt at that point and applied more learnings from the years of making and selling these Barefaced cabs. Yeah, I shall stop there. Yeah, so tell me what you thought, tell me what you want to know more about, tell me what you want to see us demo, and the styles you want to see the demos in as much as possible. We have all these speakers here. So it's just a question of, you know, sticking them in a cabinet and miking it up. We can talk about how we mic things. I prefer to use a room mic, even the really honest mic on top of the camera, because I think that's more truthful. Because where you point a 57 or whatever you're doing at a cone makes a big difference on the sound, but a room mic, that's truth. I mean, you're going to hear more reverb, but it's the truth. So yeah, I've been Alex from Barefaced. We make these awesome things, and we put these speakers in them. Or you can have custom drivers that Celestion don't make, you know, whatever else. So thank you. I'll be back with more of this soon. Goodbye. Oh, like and subscribe. You're meant to do that, aren't you? Yeah, cheers.